Hi, everyone. It's Tanya Hertz here, and tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about justice and ethics. And in the last videos, we talked about trust, and in this section, we're talking about justice, because trustworthiness, it can be hard to judge, hard to make decisions about a person, especially, like we said in the beginning, it's largely just dependent on a person's predisposition to trust. And so justice relevant acts can really serve as evidence that we can use to decide whether or not we want to trust an authority figure. And there are 4 types of justice based evidence that we'll look at: distributive, procedural, interpersonal, and informational. I'm starting with distributive justice. So distributive justice is the perceptions that we have about whether or not somebody's fair based on whether or not the outcomes that have been allocated to certain people or given to certain people are in adherence or stick to certain commonly accepted norms. And there are 3 types of norms that we use for the distribution of assets or outcomes that we can look at, and that's equity, equality, or need. So equity would mean, let's say the outcome is this cake here. So equity would be every single person gets the same slice of cake, the same size slice of cake, and it's fair that way. So I think there's 8 slices here, 8 slices, 8 pieces. That's equity. I'm sorry, that's equality. In equity, it's the person who deserves the cake more, or who puts in more effort, or who does a better job gets more of the cake. That's equity. So equality is even. Equity is if you deserve more, if you earned more, you should get more. And the final is need. So if you are more hungry, you would get a bigger piece of cake. If you're less hungry, you don't need it as much, you'd get a smaller piece of cake. Right? You can then take this cake and replace it with money, and same kinds of things. Equality, everyone in the organization would get the same amount of money, right? So if that company earned $100,000 that year, and you had 100 people, right, working in the organization, everybody gets $1,000, right? For equity, it would be if you put in more effort, if you worked more hours, if you had more education, if you were more deserving, you would get paid differently, more than the others. And then need would be if you just needed more money, you had more children, you lived in a more expensive area, then you would get more money, right? So I think it's pretty easy to see why in business, the most common norm for distributive justice is equity. People think it's more fair that people who are putting in more should get out more, right? If I have a higher level of education, I should be able to earn more than somebody who has a lower level of education. If I sell more of the product, I should get a higher commission, right, or higher salary. And most people feel that this is fair in business. And so when you're trying to establish your reputation as a trustworthy leader, you really need to look at the outcome and say, is this fair in the eyes of the employees? We also can look at procedural justice, and so that gets rid of the outcome. You don't look at the end result of what people are getting, but you look at the process and you say, was the process a fair process when I was making my decisions as a leader? So who cares about the 100,000 and how that's distributed, but the end result of how it's distributed, but were the rules and the process and the way I made the decision, was that fair? That's procedural justice. Were the procedures free from bias? Were they well, and these are the rules of fair process right here. Did you have a voice in the process? So do you have a chance to express your opinion, to say if you don't like something, and to generally believe that the leader or the organization, the authority in general, would change it? Is there a correctability? So if something is not right, do you have a way to appeal that decision if the procedure didn't work the way it was supposed to? Is there consistency? So are the decisions being made free from free from any biases, personal preferences? Are they neutral? Are they the same, consistent across people, across time? And are they representative? So do we consider the needs of all the people in our organization and not just the buddies of the leader or something like this? And then finally, are the decisions made based on accurate information? So I could give so many stories here of times when a decision was made and maybe I didn't have all of the information, and then made a decision that had I had all the information, I would have decided something else. And boy, that really makes the employees feel like the process was not fair, right? Excuse me, so sorry. And so we talked about distributive justice, we talked about procedural justice. When you are looking at the rules for each, so the distributive justice rules, again, equity, equality, and need. So are the rewards allocated according to the proper norm? So and most of the time in business, it's going to be equity, not equality or need. And then for procedural justice rules, voice, do the employees get to provide input? Correctability, do the procedures build in mechanisms for grievance or to correct grievances, for appeals if they're not happy with something? Consistency, are the procedures consistent across people, across time? Is there bias suppression? Are the procedures neutral and unbiased? Representativeness, are we considering everyone in the organization? And accuracy, are the procedures based on accurate information? So you can do this for an organization. You can also, this can also be done in any sort of situation, in any time you're making a decision about fairness and trust. And I thought this was kind of interesting. I was going to ask you to think about your professors, your teachers, the educators at Miramar College. And for me, this is really important, that I be perceived, or I be trusted by the students, and that I do things right, and that people think that I'm fair, right? So justice and fairness, remember, go hand in hand. So you can answer these questions. I'm not going to have you actually turn them in right now, but think about your teachers and think about the procedures that the instructors use to make decisions about your grades and your classes. And then this is a really good indication as to whether or not you feel that your professors are fair. Can you influence the grades if they're not after the fact? Can you be sure that your teacher is making the assessment about your grade based on not on his or her own biases, but on subjective objective open metrics? Are there consistent procedures applied across time and across people? These things matter, right? When you put it into the context of grades, these matter. And then think about procedural justice versus distributive justice. So outcome versus the process, and which is more important. So when you look at it in terms of grades, outcome justice would be, what is the final grade that you got? Where procedural justice is, how did the teacher come about the grade? How did they decide about which grade to get? And which is more important to you? Which is more important? Does it matter more the grade that you got, or how the teacher decided how you got that grade? And most of the time, people would say that it is much more important, the procedural, than the distributive. So if you get a C in the class, but you think that it was a fair C, you did the work of a C, and the teacher was fair in making the decision about the C, chances are you're not going to go complain to the dean, right? But if the procedures you feel are unfair, even if you like the outcome, you're going to feel that teacher is not somebody that you can trust. You're going to feel like that's not fair. The third type of justice is, the second type of justice, not the third, is interpersonal. No, this is the third. I'm sorry. The third type is interpersonal justice. So this is perceptions about fairness related as to whether or not the authorities treat the people fairly when they are implementing the rules. And there are two rules that we have for fair treatment, and that's the respect rule and the propriety rule. So respect rule, are people treated in a dignified manner? Is it sincere when we are articulating or telling people about things? And propriety rule is, are we behaving with propriety? Are we not being improper? Are we not making offensive marks, cursing, yelling, screaming, being abusive? Should managers in organizations, supervisors, teachers be able to yell and to curse? Well, most people would say no. They would gauge that as extremely unfair and not a place that they would want to work, not an ethical organization. Yeah, this is huge here in the United States. This is not something that you see. You don't see as much as maybe even you used to see, but in some in some other countries it still happens, and in some organizations it still happens. But by and large, most people would agree that that's not an organization that they would want to work in. Informational justice is the perceptions about fairness, or whether or not something is fair based on how the authority member, the supervisor, the organization communicated that decision, right? And so it's just how they imparted the news, how they told the news to somebody else. And the rule for fair communication are justification and truthfulness. So justification is that you've given examples to the to the employees about why you made the decision, and that you do it in a really thoughtful way. You should also be truthful, be honest, be candid in the communication. And I'll give an example of this. And I love this example. It was based on a study that was done through the University of Michigan several years ago now. And it was a really interesting study. They had an organization with two separate branches, and this was in the last financial crisis in 2008. And they realized that they were going to need to ask people to take a pay cut. And it was going to be, I think it was like 4-month pay cut. And it was a significant pay cut. It was something like 40% less money that the employees were expected to take. And they had two branches. And in one of the branches, they just made a really quick announcement to the employees. They said, look, there's going to be a 40% pay cut for the next 4 months. This is just how it's going to have to be. At the end of 4 months, your pay will go back up. Thank you. And you'll see that on your paycheck soon. People didn't get any more explanation. It was nothing else. That was it, right? In the other branch of the company, they said, look, we're going to give you a 40% pay cut, and we're sorry. We know this hurts. This hurts us too. The managers are also taking a 40% pay cut, and we're doing this to save jobs. If we don't do this, we're going to need to lay people off, and we're going to have to close down branches. And this is a Hail Mary attempt at saving people's jobs and keeping our company viable. And we thank you for your sacrifice, and we understand it hurts, right? It was basically that, right? So one of them was this short, like we don't care about you, this is the way that it is. And the other was, they took their time, they sat everybody down and they explained it. And the result was staggeringly different. You saw that there was a significant increase in things like employee theft in the organization with the short explanation. So people felt like this isn't fair, right? And so what am I going to do to even out the scales of justice? I'm going to take something from the company, right? You're going to take 40% pay cut. I'll take it out of the kitty, right? So you saw this huge spike in theft. You saw people leave the organization. You saw people talking bad about the organization. And then, there was a little uptick in things like theft in the branch where they did give a longer explanation, but it was very minimal. And so when you think about things like this, it doesn't cost you anything as an organization to just to explain to your employees what's happening, and to give sincere, honest, truthful explanations. And in the end, there's there's huge savings for the organization, and this is an easy way that you can improve the climate of the company. Right? Okay, so that's that for justice. We're gonna call this good here, and then we'll have one more presentation on, or one more video on ethics, and we'll see you again for that one. All right, take care. Thank you.